This is Right to Life Radio with John Gerardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of the Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Gerardi.
Well, the Barrett confirmation hearings are over, and now the fun really begins.
That's right.
Right to Life Radio with John Gerardi here with my good buddy Jonathan Keller. Jonathan, how you doing?
Pretty decent. My brain is still a little bit mush because worked my way through most of the hearings.
It is enough to turn one's brain to mush.
I was listening to them on 2x speed in most cases.
Okay. See, this is your way of coping.
That's right.
My way of coping for the hearings is not to listen to them, but just to read the transcripts. That's my way of it allows me not to have to sit through and hear the grating tones of
Sheldon
Whitehouse, and
Maisie
Hirono, and Kamala Harris.
Well,
and all these lovely people.
I will say this year it was,
or frankly, just to be bipartisan, I can't stand listening to Ted Cruz for more than like 10 seconds. I need to just turn this. I just need to turn his politician smarminess politician levels down by about 10 clicks. I like Ted Cruz, but yeah, he's got to turn it down. And Ben Sass, also, who's,
I actually thought, I understand. I totally get some of the showboating and everything. I thought Ben Sass was good. Mike Lee actually annoyed me slightly more than normal because he at least in his opening statement, he was much more kind of aggressive. The person who I thought was the funniest, Chairman Graham actually did a pretty good job, but
yeah.
Good old Joe Kennedy from Louisiana.
John Kennedy.
John Kennedy. Sorry, John Kennedy.
Not that John Kennedy. This is a different Senator John Kennedy. Kennedy is the senator from Louisiana.
And he is a barrel of laughs.
Yeah, Anyway, so that is the way we cope with this, is we all have our ways of coping. Some use alcohol. I read transcripts.
Well, and hey, even Judge Barrett herself.
She at one point misspoke. How did she? What was the thing where she misspoke? She said something about she accidentally said something like she would need wine.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And then at the end of it, she said, or when she came back at the beginning of day 3, she said, "I'm not going to lie, I did have a glass of wine last night."
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
And I'm probably going to have one tonight too.
Yeah. So anyway, the Barrett hearings are concluded. At least her questioning by members of the Senate is done. They've had character witnesses on her behalf testify before the committee, and it appears at the moment that the Barrett confirmation is on a very smooth path towards final confirmation. And there are a couple of things to talk about that were interesting during the course of the hearing. One is this whole notion about super precedents, and we heard about this.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 super precedent. Now, super precedent and stare decisis. Right?
And to clarify, John, this is not President Trump with a cape. We're saying precedent.
Precedent with a CE.
President.
Not president with an SI. Precedent with a CE. So let's discuss these questions. One of the ways the left constantly wants to frame Roe v. Wade is by calling it a super precedent. This has been their recent tactic in recent Supreme Court hearings with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and now with Amy Barrett, is asking her, do you view Roe v. Wade as a super precedent? And I just wish to give you some basic legal analysis here. I'm not the fanciest lawyer in the world. I'm never going to be nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court. But I did go to law school for 3 whole years, and I practiced a bit, and I can tell you all, super precedent is not really a thing, okay? Basically, this is a made-up term that the Democrats on the committee have started using for Roe v. Wade. And basically, we can do all these smoke screens about what we actually care about. Democrats have made a big point about Barrett's going to overturn the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, she's not going to overturn the Affordable Care Act. Whether as much as you would like her to, I find it almost impossible to believe she's going to overturn the Affordable Care Act. We can get into that later on in the show. But everything really at the end of the day is about Roe for the Democrats. What they are afraid of, the reason why they're considering packing the Supreme Court after the election if they win, it's all about Roe. Roe is that's their idol. That's their shrine. That's the thing that above all else they are working to protect and preserve is Roe v. Wade. Now, so as a result, they start asking these stupid questions about super precedent. Is this a super precedent? Is this something just untouchable by the court? And this plays into this doctrine, which we talk about every time a Supreme Court justice is nominated, Jonathan, called stare decisis. Stare decisis. Now, if you listen to the left, you might think that stare decisis means uphold legal abortion forever. But that's not what it means. It's a Latin phrase.
That's what it means when the Republicans are nominating the judge.
When Republicans nominate Supreme Court justices, stare decisis is the most important issue presented to a Supreme Court justice. When Democrats nominate a Supreme Court justice, who cares? They can overturn any precedent they want. Stare decisis is a Latin phrase, and it means to stand with decided questions. And it is or decided matters, or decided things. And is it a rule? Is it a doctrine? Is it a vague theory of legal interpretation? It's probably the latter. Okay, it's not really it isn't like some all-encompassing rule. It's basically the judgment that a Supreme Court justice gives about when he or she should respect a prior precedent, even if they don't necessarily think it's 100% perfect. Okay? Because of a desire for stability in the law, because of a desire for, that people have relied on the law being a certain way, maybe in certain real-world contexts, so you don't want to upset that reliance interest that people have. So what weight do you as a Supreme Court justice, who can, if you want, as a Supreme Court justice, you can overthrow any prior decision you want. And some of the most important cases the Supreme Court ever decided were acts of overturning a prior bad decision. Okay, Brown versus Board of Education is a famous decision overturning prior Supreme Court precedents about segregation in schools. So what do you think about stare decisis? Now, most of you are sort of sitting there thinking, boy, this seems like a boring, very abstract legal doctrine. And indeed, it is both boring and highly abstract.
You would be correct.
You would be correct. But in the context of Roe v. Wade, it becomes really important. Okay, in the context of Roe, this is the focus of all the Democrat senators when they get a Republican Supreme Court nominee is, what do you think about stare decisis? You may not agree with Roe, but you have to respect it and uphold it as stare decisis. It's been a 40-year-long precedent of the Supreme Court. It's been upheld a billion times, blah, 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 blah.
John, look, people rely, they have made decisions on this law, and they've ordered their intimate lives around this. And it's up to everybody.
Or at least the people now within the 9-month window from now to 9 months from now.
Yeah, but look, everybody deserves the right to define for themselves the mystery of life.
Right, exactly. Well, that's how not Antonin Scalia. That is how Anthony Kennedy thought of those things, obviously.
For those of you legal nerds out there, you probably caught we're
so
subtly referencing.
Anthony Kennedy famously inserted into Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was the successor case to Roe v. Wade, this bizarre passage where he said, basically to uphold legalized abortion, he thought that abortion was upheld because it was part of liberty. The word liberty as it's used in the 14th Amendment. No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And Kennedy talked about liberty as in part being that at the heart of liberty is the right to define for oneself meaning, existence, and the mystery of human life. And apparently what that meant for Kennedy actually, if you're rolling your eyes already at what is bad freshman philosophy paper quality prose, what Kennedy was saying was that part of liberty is the right of a mother to decide whether or not the child in her womb is a living human person with the kinds of protections that should exist for a human person under law, whether those rights adhere to that person or not. That is what liberty is for Anthony Kennedy. If you take that to its logical conclusion, I can make a decision that those rights don't adhere to my friend Jonathan Keller here and have a bread truck run him over.
That's right.
So that's at the heart of liberty for me, according to Anthony Kennedy. Now, is Roe v. Wade a super precedent? This is the assumption the Democrats make. And I think Amy Barrett gave a brilliant rebuttal to it when she was being asked repeatedly. And actually, I forget which senator it was specifically who was asking her this. Is Roe v. Wade one of these sort of super precedents that we do not dare alter or touch? As sort of given that even a Supreme Court justice is comfortable saying, yes, that was the right decision, like Loving versus Virginia about interracial marriage, Brown v. Board of Education, etc. Barrett basically said, Judge, I don't think this decision is a super precedent. If it were, we wouldn't be having these kinds of debates about it in the United States Senate.
Oh, mic drop.
Exactly. So if it's a super precedent that's untouchable, there would be broad-based agreement about it.
Yes.
But the fact that there is so much disagreement is weighing into Barrett's calculus that maybe this isn't really a super precedent, which I thought was brilliant. And
it'd be, John, like, there's the example of, obviously, we see the horrible decision in the Dred Scott case. Mm-hmm. Or we see the case of the Korematsu decision. Mm-hmm. The former that said, there are no rights that African Americans have that the white man is bound to respect.
Sure.
Which was abhorrent and probably, arguably, I think, the worst Supreme Court decision of all time. But secondly, the Korematsu decision that said, well, yeah, we can intern hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans just because of their ancestry and because we're worried they might somehow be predisposed to collaborate with the Empire of Japan during World War II.
Sure.
Those being refuted, the refutation of those cases are super precedents. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I have not seen anybody in the most crazy fever swamp areas of the internet talk about, what we really need to do is bring back Japanese internment.
Right. I think there was one highly questionable Pat Buchanan article about it, but other than that, where he was saying there was actually evidence that there were Japanese infiltrators, but yeah, I don't think he was like, yes, let's lock them all up in camps. Anyway,
the idea is that is like an example of nobody is talking at all, like not remotely in law or in public opinion.
When you have broad-based agreement about a decision across society, across legal academia, across across the whole spectrum of American society and American law, yeah, that's a super precedent. And the difficulty with Roe is severalfold. First of all, while the final holding of Roe v. Wade, legal abortion for all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason, the final holding of Roe plus Doe v. Bolton, while the final holding of Roe v. Wade has been law and has been upheld, the rationale that Roe took to get there has been universally panned, not universally, but has been broadly in a bipartisan fashion panned by both the left and the right. Okay, Ruth Bader Ginsburg thought the legal reasoning of Roe v. Wade wasn't sound. Ruth Bader Ginsburg also didn't quite agree with the legal reasoning even of Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was really Roe's successor case. Conservatives have panned Roe. Liberals, while agreeing with its final holding, have panned Roe. And in fact, Roe v. Wade is not even really the controlling law in the country today regulating abortion. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was kind of Roe's successor case from 1992, that, much more so, is basically the controlling law and has been since 1992 for looking at abortion regulations. So this notion that Roe is this untouchable precedent, when lots and lots and lots of people in the legal academy, lots and lots of people in broader society, in politics, have made strong arguments for decades that this is wrong, that it violates one of the major schools of legal interpretation in American jurisprudence, originalism.
As recently as this most recent term.
Yeah, exactly. And you have Supreme Court justices still offering dissenting opinions saying that this is wrongly decided, wrongly decided, wrongly decided. It's clear that it isn't really some untouchable super precedent.
Despite how much Dianne Feinstein would like it to be.
As much as Dianne Feinstein would like it to be, it isn't. All right, when we come back, I'm going to have a brief little segment about originalism and about all the dopey things that have been said about it. That's next on Right to Life Radio. Power Talk 96.7 AM 1400, a production, Right to Life of Central California. Albert Hammond with It Never Rains in California.
Feels that way sometimes.
Unfortunately true. It hasn't really rained around here in we had that one day after the fires where it lightly drizzled and then it cleared up the air quality spectacularly. So that's wonderful. Anyway, Never Rains in Southern California.
That's true. Is it Southern California or is it all of California that he sings?
I think he says it never, at different points in the song, he says it never rains in Southern California. And then in another part of the song, he says it never rains in California.
Okay.
So, yeah. It's specifically about the experience of going out to Hollywood and trying to make it. So, anyway, Albert Hammond. There you go. Right to Life. His son, Albert Hammond Jr., is a guitarist in The Strokes. There you go.
Okay.
Little known factoid for those of you like myself who are enthusiasts of early to mid 2000s indie rock groups. All right.
Yeah.
Very briefly, and we'll probably get into it more in the next segment. Much has been made of Judge Barrett being an originalist. And I try not on the show to make too much out of random morons tweeting things on Twitter. I want
John,
the morons.
That's the whole point of Twitter.
Yeah. I don't want to make it a big segment of this one person said, this one totally unimportant person with 20 followers on Twitter said something stupid. Therefore, all of the left thinks this way. However, this theme, at first I saw it from random morons on Twitter who only have 20 followers, and then it just kept building. And more important people kept repeating this line of phrasing. I saw a writer for Slate say it, and I'm like, okay, well, that's a bigger person. And then I heard this person, okay, well, that's a more important person. And then finally, Dan Rather and Hillary Clinton have both on Twitter said this exact same thing. So I think I should protest it. Basically, it's this. Hey, Amy Barrett, you call yourself an originalist. If you're such an originalist, then you shouldn't even be a judge because in 1789, after the Constitution was ratified, women weren't allowed to vote or allowed to be judges. If you're such an originalist, blah, blah, blah. Now, my views on originalism are evolving. I think it's fair to say, Jonathan, as an observer of me, you would say I am becoming less of a doctrinaire originalist. I think originalism has its problems. I think it's a better alternative than the dominant lefty philosophy, which just seems to be adopt left-wing policies, legalized abortion, whatever, by any hook or crook you can. But I have my criticisms of originalism. But I will make this defense of originalism, especially as it relates to abortion and all these other questions. Originalism doesn't mean that every bad social condition that existed in the 1790s is the thing that you advocate for. Okay? The point of originalism is you look to the text of the Constitution or of whatever statute you're looking at, and you try to interpret it according to the plain meaning of the text or according to the accepted public meaning of the text at the time of its ratification. So whatever text you're talking about at the time of its ratification. This does not mean that we as originalists are logically inconsistent when we think that black people should not be counted as 3/5 of a person. Okay? It's not inconsistent because the Constitution does not count black people as 3/5 of a person anymore. Okay? That part of the Constitution was amended and replaced with new parts of the Constitution, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments. Those are the amendments that we're looking at according to their accepted public meanings at the time of their ratification after the Civil War. Okay? So
there's also something called the 19th Amendment, which allowed women to vote.
Exactly. Because an originalist looks at whatever part of the Constitution he or she is reading, according to the accepted public meaning at the time of ratification. That means we don't look at voting procedures according to the 1780s original Constitution. We look at the amendments when they were adopted. So the 19th Amendment, when it was adopted in 1920, we look at that, not whatever existed beforehand. Actually, the original Constitution did not actually prohibit women from voting.
Some states allowed them to.
It was just up to the states. New Jersey allowed women to vote.
Well, and John, I have to play on this because this is something else that I have seen. Our friends on the left have looked at as some kind of big own, where Joe Biden has said, "Look, if I was, if I'm elected and Roe v. Wade is overturned, we're going to immediately introduce legislation to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land.
Right.
And all these lefties I've seen on those like, yeah, take that. And it's like, yes, that's what you should do. If you believe that a policy should change, you should introduce legislation.
Right. Like you could have done that if you had the political will, you could have done that this whole time. You've just let the court do your dirty work for you in this totally undemocratic fashion. And, by the way, Democrats, good luck with that. Okay? If you want to see yourselves lose your majorities in the House and whatever possible majority you might have in the Senate in 2022, that is a surefire way to do it, is to try to pass the most radical abortion legislation in American history. So anyway, originalism has its problems. It doesn't mean that you believe in every negative social condition that existed in the 1790s. All right? So if you hear someone say, oh, you're such an originalist, how come you do blah, 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 blah? All right, just forget about it. Just ignore these people. They're stupid. They're not serious. They're not worth the time of day. All right, when we come back, we'll have more on the Barrett confirmation hearings. And as Jonathan was saying, this idea of the Democrats to pass legislation, nationwide abortion legalization legislation. That's next. John singing us in. My mom dislikes Elton John. My dad loves Elton John. I think my dad didn't realize Elton John was gay for a really long time, and I think my mom had to break the news to him.
Had he only heard him and never seen his ridiculously flamboyant outfits?
I don't know. Well, I might be misremembering this, and Dad, I apologize if I'm slandering you here on the radio, because I know he listens to the show. But I feel like I remember a conversation with my parents, and my dad's like, Elton John's not gay. And my mom's like, yeah, he's like obviously quite gay.
I will not.
So maybe my dad was just kidding, and I was too young to understand that. I don't know.
I will not repeat it on the air because this is a family show. But I remember one time when I was in high school, I began quoting a line from a Monty Python routine.
Which you did not realize was far more vulgar than you understood.
And one of the dads in the homeschool group was like, no, you cannot say that. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, I guess I'll just have to wait to find out how exciting that quote actually was.
Oy vey.
Yeah. So anyway, apologies to my dad if I'm completely slandering him on the radio. My dad did once mistake when we moved to Fresno in 1991. My dad apparently did mistake sheep he thought they were fuzzy pigs. And so this has been a long-running joke at my poor dad's expense, my dad who takes a lot of grief. Sorry, Dad, for backing this bus up again over just throwing. It's not like he threw him under the bus, and then we just backed the bus up.
It's not like he has an important public position or anything.
Well, you know. He's only the face of Valley Children's Hospital.
That's right.
Anyway, love you, Dad. Hey, if that's the worst thing we can say about Dr. Joe Girardi, he's doing all right.
I will remember this come Easter if we're ever getting together again as families, and I want to have some lamb. I will say just pass the fuzzy pig.
Pass the fuzzy pig. There you go. All righty. So we're talking about the Barrett confirmation, and last week on the show, well, in the broader context of the Supreme Court, the Republicans are about to have a 6-3, barring some crazy monkey wrench thrown into the proceedings by the Democrats. And don't think that isn't possible, by the way. I think let's all remember in the Kavanaugh confirmation process, it was after the hearings were done that all of a sudden all of these accusations against Brett Kavanaugh, without any corroborating evidence, were presented alleging him of sexual assault.
Which, John, I mean, I hate to even bring it up, but Mazie Hirono apparently has this new thing that she does since 2018 where she asks, in her words, she says, no, I do this for every single nominee who comes before me, whether you're Supreme Court. Because
every nominee she's heard since 2018 has been a Republican nominee.
Whether you're Supreme Court, whether you are District Court, Circuit Court, or whether you're a member of the executive branch, I ask every single one the same questions. And two of those are, or one of them is, have you ever sexually assaulted somebody? So she actually asked that question of Amy Coney Barrett during her questioning time.
Which is unbelievable. Which, by the way, let's just note for Mazie Hirono, maybe some of the dumbest questions in the whole confirmation process for Judge Barrett. And the idea that you can't ask a question like that in the written stuff that is submitted to the nominee beforehand. Yes. The only reason she does it is for her little TV moment in the sun. That's all. The only reason she does that. Mazie Hirono's a flipping moron. Anyway,
yes.
sorry for ad hominem attacks, but Mazie Hirono had apparently no understanding of the difference between what a judge does with law and a legislator does with policy. Anyway, lots of dumb things. Anyway, in the context of the broader picture of the Supreme Court, many on the left are rattling their sabers about packing the Supreme Court, increasing the number of justices on the Supreme Court in the event that Biden wins and in the event that the Democrats take the Senate, which if Biden wins, it's likely the Democrats will take the Senate. If Biden wins and if the Democrats take the Senate, they are proposing the idea of increasing the number of justices on the Supreme Court, passing a law, which you can do, especially if they get rid of the judicial filibuster, allowing themselves, to have just a simple majority advance legislation as opposed to 60 votes, which is kind of the rule in the Senate now. Pass a simple law, majority in the House, majority in the Senate, president sign on, a hypothetical President Biden sign on to it, to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court from 9 to, say, 13, and then to allow Vice President, a hypothetical President Biden, to nominate and a Democrat-controlled Senate to confirm 4 new justices to the Supreme Court. That is the idea that many on the left are floating, and not just random wackos. You have members of the Senate advocating for it. Kamala Harris advocated for it when she was running for vice president, and Joe Biden refuses to say one way or another whether he's going to do it. In fact, he says, you're not going to find out until after the election, and the American people don't deserve to know about it before the election. And people keep defending him by saying, well, it's just a weird hypothetical. Yeah. All campaign promises are hypotheticals. Okay, it's you're elected when you run for office. It's on the basis of, hey, what would you do as president of the United States? It's a hypothetical. Okay, if you win, what are you going to do? And Biden's like, well, I'm not going to say if I'm going to pack the court or not. That's a hypothetical. Of course it's a hypothetical. That's the point of this exercise here. Why should we vote for you? What hypothetically would you do if you got our votes? Anyway. My thought last week on the show was that Biden was trying to squirrel his way out of that. I think Biden inherently does not want to expand the court. I think he understands that would be a bad look. I think there are Democrat members of the Senate who don't necessarily want to expand the Supreme Court, including particularly Dianne Feinstein, who is the ranking Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, which would be a major cog in this process.
She's facing massive pushback from groups like We Demand Justice, saying she has to be removed.
Because she was too nice to Lindsey Graham.
It's time for Senator Feinstein to step down from her leadership position on the Senate Judiciary Committee. She has undercut Democrats' position at every step, from undermining the calls for the filibuster and court reform, straight through to thanking Republicans for the most egregious partisan power grab in the modern history of the Supreme Court.
Exactly. So Biden facing his own reluctance, because just last year he campaigned against packing the Supreme Court, and the possibility that other Democrats in the Senate especially don't want to pack the court, particularly Feinstein, who would be the chair of the Judiciary Committee in a Democrat-controlled Senate. Because of that, I think Biden was trying to squirrel his way out of it by floating the idea of, hey, instead, let's just eliminate the filibuster, and then we'll pass a national abortion law. A national abortion law. And this is why, okay? If the Supreme Court, let's suppose the Supreme Court throws out Roe v. Wade. If they do that, it allows every legislature in the country, every state legislature and Congress, to make their own laws regulating abortion as you see fit. So you could see Texas ban abortion after the first trimester, or Iowa ban abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy, or Oregon ban abortion, say you can only have abortions with this kind of a health risk to the mother, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All kinds of ways you could regulate abortion if Roe v. Wade is not on the books. Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey basically say the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution requires X, Y, and Z for legalized abortion. And that hamstrings the ability of state legislatures to pass reasonable abortion restrictions of those sorts. However, if the U.S. Congress passes an abortion law and says this is how abortion will be regulated for the whole country, then that would almost make the country Roe v. Wade overturn proof. Okay? What the Democrats are floating, what Biden himself has promoted, and this would be the most radical piece of abortion legislation ever passed at the national level, is basically to codify the holding of Roe v. Wade as a federal statute. And if you do that, if you say, okay, here's a normal law that we have passed, majority in the House, majority in the Senate, president signs off. We pass this law. Abortion must be legal for all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason. Basically, just take the text of Roe v. Wade, what it required, boom. That's now a federal law. It's not a constitutional requirement, but it's federal law. Well, in that case, one, I don't know even how you overturn Roe v. Wade, because then at that point it almost makes the question, it makes the question moot, because the final outcome will still be the same. So basically, even if Roe v. Wade is thrown out, the United States will still have the same kinds of abortion laws on the books. And Biden can do that without packing the Supreme Court. Now, that's been my thought. However, we've seen this very aggressive move on the part of the left over the last weekend to redefine court packing. And it seems like the memo went out to everybody, all these Democrat legislators, everybody, that the Republicans are the ones packing the courts. The Republicans are the ones packing the courts. And we'll get into, by the way, in the last segment, I'm going to say for what court packing actually means and why this is a blatant manipulation of language.
It reminds me of the scene with Al Pacino. It's like, I'm not out of order. You're out of this whole process. It's like, no.
No.
Court packing has a defined meaning.
Yes, and we will get to that in the next segment. We'll get to that in the next segment. But it is making me think, Jonathan, I think there's actually more cohesive Democrat support for actually packing the Supreme Court. I think I had thought before they weren't actually going to do it. And I thought, with Feinstein saying she doesn't want to pack the court, Feinstein doesn't even want to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate, which, frankly, I've never been prouder of Dianne Feinstein as my senator, because I think Feinstein understands, as a longtime member of the Senate, you're not always in the majority in the Senate. A lot of times you're in the minority. And when you're in the minority, it's a really useful tool to have is the filibuster. If you have the filibuster, it gives you the ability to stop legislation you don't like with only 41 votes.
Yep.
Okay, why is the Affordable Care Act still the law? It's because of the filibuster. Okay, why were the first few years of the Trump administration really not as effective as they could have been? It was because of the filibuster in the U.S. Senate. Okay, in spite of the fact that Republicans had the majority in the Senate for all 4 years, Democrats in the Senate were able to stop almost everything Trump wanted to do. The only thing Trump was able to get accomplished were tax cuts, regulatory changes, stuff where you only needed 50 votes in the Senate, where the filibuster traditionally doesn't apply, and judicial confirmations, where also you don't need 50 votes. You don't need 60 votes.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry Reid.
Thank you, Harry Reid. Although, really, it's not just thank you, Harry Reid. I could do a whole show about the history of the judicial filibuster, which is such utter nonsense that, anyway, it goes all the way back to the George W. Bush administration. Anyway. But I now am sort of wondering, I think this is the outrageous part of this presidential campaign. You have Joe Biden with disdain refusing even to say, with disdain saying, not only am I not going to say what my position is on packing the court, I'm not going to tell you until after the election.
You don't deserve to know.
And you don't deserve to know. People asked him, don't the voters deserve to know? And Biden said, no, they don't. This would be the biggest, and let's just clarify, to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court in order to achieve certain ideological goals would be the most radical reshaping of American government since, I don't know, we've had 9 justices on the Supreme Court for 150 years. I don't know, maybe since the direct election of senators.
Yep.
Maybe that's the most recent major change to the structure of the federal government as far as how this stuff works. Because basically, it once you open that Pandora's box, guess what? The minute the Republicans get back in power, they're going to add more justices or just eliminate your justices. And then it'll just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until maybe someday, Jonathan, we'll be high enough on the totem pole where you and I will be Supreme Court justices.
That's right.
On the 80,000 seat Supreme Court of the United States. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about this language of court packing and what it means. That's next. This is the Eagles with Johnny Come Lately. One of my faves, for obvious reasons. John Gerardi here. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all of you who have joined the 300 Club. The 300 Club is our little club of donors who agreed to give us $25 a month. That's $300 a year to help support all of our ministries at Right to Life of Central California, all our operating costs. If all of you listening to the sound of my voice were to join the 300 Club, we'd practically never really even need a fundraiser. And if you think about all the tens of dollars being zapped from your credit card for streaming services you either never watch or don't really need to watch, $25 a month to support Right to Life is probably not that big a deal. I also want to particularly thank and mention, so I want to thank some of our members of the 300 Club: Dick Caglia, Christopher and Megan Gallo, John and Lloydell Murrow, my dad's golfing buddy, John Murrow, Daryl and Rosemary Kennedy, Yvonne Osuna, Carolyn Wong, Lynn and Judith Ratzlaff, Doris Avila, Brent Foster, Annie Tremp, John and Patricia McCann, and Tim and Lazel Martin. Thank you all so much for joining. Also, I want to mention our longtime supporter of Right to Life of Central California, board member, former employee, auction volunteer extraordinaire, golf volunteer extraordinaire, one of the people who hired me to be director at Right to Life, one of the people who hired Jonathan to be director at Right to Life, back when he was director. Our friend Debbie Bone passed away on October 8th and just had her funeral earlier this week. We miss her very deeply, and all of you who are sort of in the Right to Life family who may have known her, please keep her and her family in your prayers as we mourn her passing. She was a great Right to Life advocate and a very important person in the history of our movement in the city of Fresno, and will be very deeply missed. So to Tim and all of the family, Tim and Mike and Mary Grace and
Stu, and their families,
and all their families and the grandkids, and to our board members, our board member Larry Holliday, who's Debbie's brother-in-law, and his wife Renee, Debbie's sister. Our prayers and condolences with all of you. All right, Jonathan, to close out the show, I want to talk about what court packing means. All right.
What it really means.
What it actually means. Last weekend, the Democrats took to all the Sunday shows and said, well, court packing, what the Republicans are doing is court packing. Look at how they packed all these courts. How they nominated all of these judges for all up and down these federal courts for 4 years, just rammed through all these judges. And they're ramming through a Supreme Court justice with, 6 weeks before an election, taking Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat as if she actually owns the seat.
That's right.
You may not know this, Jonathan. You can actually put conditions on your Supreme Court seat in your will. That's actually a thing you can do.
Yeah.
Taking Ruth
It just
Bader
has to be
Ginsburg's
your
seat.
dying wish.
It has to be her dying wish that President Trump not fill her seat.
It's irrevocable.
It's irrevocable, exactly. And that's there. Look at them packing those courts. So if we pack the courts, it's a justified response, is the subtext, the unstated subtext. Now, packing the courts, that phrase, packing the court, is a term of art that has a certain set meaning in American history and American law.
Does not refer to people running down the stands during the middle of an NBA game.
No,
and
it does not.
packing
in the court.
That is not what it
Doesn't
means.
refer to a tight zone defense that makes it hard to drive to the hoop. Packing the interior. No, it's not what it means. Packing the court specifically means increasing the number of judges on a court in order to achieve a certain predetermined ideological outcome. That is what FDR tried to do in 1937. At perhaps the peak of his power, FDR in 1937, just been reelected president in 36, had huge Democrat majorities in both houses of Congress, and he wanted to do what these Democrats today are currently rattling their sabers to do. The Supreme Court kept blocking various pieces of New Deal legislation, saying this is an unconstitutional overreach of federal governmental authority. And so FDR said, well, screw you guys. I'm going to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court. I'm going to add 6 new justices to the Supreme Court, nominate a whole bunch of new dealers, get my Democrat Senate to confirm them, and be on our merry way, passing whatever we want.
And John, I want to point out,
Democrats, go ahead.
Even FDR had the vague fig leaf of, I'm doing this because some of the judges are old.
Right.
He at least tried to hide what he was really doing.
And his own Democrat Party, and again, they controlled like almost 3/4 of both houses of Congress at that time. They said, FDR, not only no, but heck no. What you're doing is basically approaching dictatorial. As Al Martino very dramatically ends the show for us with "Here in My Heart." And these Democrats during the FDR time said, never again in American history should someone do this. This is the action of a petty dictator. Let's hope that abortion isn't so important to the Democrat Party that they would overturn this long-standing norm of our constitutional order. That'll do it for us. Thank you so much for listening to Right to Life Radio.